that was really influential for me to identify that not everything's buttoned up and we don't have it all put together, and to learn that those experiences, those fears, some of them are irrational, some of them are real, and how to work through and push forward in life and navigate life that way. Welcome to another episode of Ryan Reflects. If you are new here, my name is Dr. Ryan Corte, and this is the Ryan Reflects podcast, focused on building the journey from optometry school all the way up until clinical practice, when you're ready to hang it up and say, hey, I have lived a good life and a good career. But my goal here, if you're new to the podcast, is to drive value for optometrists, no matter where they're at in their optometric journey. And my ask is, if you are new or if you've been listening for a while, please hit that like, that subscribe, that follow button. It sends a signal to the podcast platforms that, hey, you're getting value out of this content. It helps me continue to drive my mission forward, which is pushing our profession to the highest possible level, one podcast at a time. In today's podcast, I'm going to be diving into my optometry school journey. If you haven't had the chance, I did a solo podcast early in the year on my pre-optometry journey and how I landed on optometry and how I selected the optometry school that I decided to move forward with. But this podcast is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to walk you through my journey at the Ohio State University College of Optometry and what it was like to go there, some tips and tricks for anybody who is going through the process, but also I'm going to give opportunity for anybody listening to provide feedback in the comments on, hey, this was what my journey was like, or I agree or I disagree. And so let's dive in. So those who aren't familiar, I went to Michigan State University for undergrad, born and raised in the Midwest. So lived in Michigan my entire life, leading up until optometry school. And during the process of school evaluations, for a quick reminder for anybody who didn't listen to the initial episode, I evaluated a number of schools all across the country. It's really an exciting time to get all the information in the mail, to be emailed all the information about all of the schools and colleges of optometry across the country. And immediately I decided I wanted to leave the state of Michigan and go somewhere else. And I'll touch on that in a minute. But I interviewed at a number of schools. ICO was top on my list. Ohio State, top on my list. And then the other interviews, I take that back. I did interview a number of schools. I canceled the other interviews because I really knew between those two, I wanted to make a decision. But I selected Ohio State, and I'm really happy I did. I went from Michigan State University undergrad, transitioned into another Big Ten university, and had a kind of similar feel on campus. And we're getting there the initial day of orientation and walking the campus and getting a lot of the similar just emotions of like walking Michigan State. Really, really big institution. However, what I ended up finding out is we really spent a ton of time together just in the small school and college of optometry with that close-knit group of your classmates and some of the classes above and below you. But I really that's what drove me to the school originally. I was excited about their business program. I was excited about the opportunity to continue my education in the Big Ten educational system and university. And I'll never forget when I landed on campus, that orientation, we had an initial barbecue and everybody there was just so kind, so friendly, competitive. We were playing sand volleyball. We were, just catching up, getting to know each other. And it was at that moment I felt really good about my decision. And I'll tell you a couple things that kind of jumped out at me. The situation to go out of state, anybody listening who has the opportunity to go in state and potentially earn a degree with in-state tuition to become an optometrist, highly recommend you consider that. And the reason being is if it's an in-state public institution, you're likely going to get in-state tuition and you'll come out with a lot less student loan debt. So the Ohio State University College of Optometry bundles pretty much everything into the first year for what you would pay to go out of state all 4 years, because once you're a resident for a year, you can start getting in-state tuition. And so, I look back and yeah, I definitely could have went to Michigan College of Optometry and had that experience, but I'm still happy I did go to Ohio State just based on all the connections and the personal and professional growth that I experienced. But something to be mindful of, right? If you have a public school and college of optometry in your state, highly consider it. you can save yourself a lot of money. Now, if it's a private one, guess what? Everybody's paying the same tuition. And so my first year, I remember living off campus. A good friend of mine, Alan Bartholomew, and I lived maybe about a 15, 20-minute drive off campus. And, we would have a little bit of traffic to and from, and we were on campus all the time. And so anybody who is listening to this and maybe they're going into school, or maybe you had the chance to live off campus versus on campus, me personally, I'd highly recommend shifting and living closer to the school. You're going to be there all the time, whether at the library, whether you're doing a class, whether you are going through clinicals or you're going through different labs, you are socializing with others, getting involved. It's just nice to be local, not have to drive to and from, hit traffic. I mean, that's time away from doing other things, just sitting in the car. During my second, third year, I did end up living on campus, and I really did appreciate that. And we ended up getting a house, could walk into the campus maybe 10 or so minutes, but it was a walk, no parking. And yeah, could get to and from really quickly. And so that was something that I remember appreciating once I had the opportunity to do so. Another thing to be mindful of is the pressure to succeed. And so I remember getting there, and I remember, talking to other classmates and seeing that there were some that were significantly more intelligent than me, and some that were on the same wavelength as me, maybe some that would struggle throughout. And at Ohio State, one of the key attributes was, hey, listen, it was kind of known by everybody. If you don't pass a class, you don't just retake that class, you are in jeopardy of retaking the entire year. And so that stressed me out a little bit. I remember going through the first year clinically and going through a lot of the didactic coursework, kind of a revisitation of what you had learned in undergrad, and feeling that pressure and building up that mindset that, wow, I need to come with my A game. I can't slip up. And, full transparency, I never even came close, but it was just a mental battle. And I did have some friends who did. They had a couple courses where maybe, if you only took a midterm and a final and then a couple quizzes in between, if you slipped up on some of the quizzes in the midterm, you're subject to a really, really pressure-filled preparation for that final. So not sure if school's like that, but I do remember that adding to a little bit of the added pressure to get through and to be successful. But again, during my first year, built a lot of relationships, really grinded through, because again, it's an intensive year, a lot of credits, a lot of didactic education. And I remember finding ways to get involved. And one of the ways I tried to get involved was run for class president. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you remember the story, and I'll just revisit the story. I ended up running for class president, came out of undergrad thinking, wow, I got this. I was confident in myself. I thought I could build relationship with others, but I absolutely came in unprepared for the presentation to the class about why I should be class president. I was sitting in the hallway. There was a couple other of us sitting out there, and a good friend of mine, Lindsay Diefenbacher, was in the classroom presenting. And Lindsay did 3 years at Ohio State for undergrad. She knew the campus in and out, very charismatic, very bubbly, very likable. And she prepared and she delivered an incredible speech. And the speech was all about why optometry, why Ohio State, why choose her to lead the class forward throughout our 4 years. I was sitting in the hallway and looking at a couple of the other individuals that were running. I didn't say much. I just remember sitting in my head like, I am screwed. And it was just one of those experiences that I'll never forget, because I got waxed. I don't know what the final vote was, but I just know going in, giving my pitch, my speech on why I would like to be the class president, and hearing some of the other ones, and just knowing in my heart, Lindsay had it in the bag. And she did. She won. And going through that first year, trying to find other ways to get involved. So throughout the year, I ended up, which is another point I want to bring up, I ended up getting involved in as many things as I possibly could. There was an interprofessional council, which was a group that would get together from dentistry and optometry and medicine and pharmacy and all the different professional programs that were there at Ohio State. And we'd collaborate and find ways to socialize and work together. So I really enjoyed that group. There was the private practice club, and there was the sports vision club. And throughout all these clubs, you kind of had the chance to mix and mingle and get together with like-minded individuals on things that you liked and things that you didn't like. I wasn't involved in every club, but I definitely try my best to dive in and experience that. And if you're listening and you're like, well, why get involved when all I really want to do is study and pass my classes and pass boards and just move on? Well, my question to you is why not? Why not take the time, the energy, and the effort to get involved, to learn, to laugh, to grow, to experience life, and do so in the confines of amongst others who have a similar interest at heart? And so one of my friends ended up asking me, hey, like, there's a group called the American Optometric Student Association. Heather Bowen is her name, and she was the trustee at the time, and she asked me to run for the trustee elect position. Didn't know much about it, didn't know to what degree or to what capacity I would get involved in doing so. But I really, really took a leap of faith and said, let's do it. I ran for the position. I don't even remember if it was contested, but I got it. And I'm grateful I did, because that kind of helped me embark on a journey with an optometry school where I learned so much outside of just which is better, one or two, and the didactic and clinical knowledge of becoming an optometrist. I learned how our profession operated. Got to go to optometry's meeting. I got to go and talk to industry. I got to learn from others that were trying to push and rise up and move our profession forward. And I'll touch base on that a little bit more. And the biggest kind of challenge I would say for the first year or two is just trying to understand how to balance professional life. So, like many of you, and like myself, undergrad was a different ball of wax. I would go to classes, I would absorb the information, I would study, but I would also work hard and play hard. And I'd go to intramurals, or I'd go out and party with my friends, or I would go to other campuses and try to watch Michigan State play in other sporting events. Was involved from like a social perspective just as much as I was from a didactic perspective. And the coursework, at least to me, for first year and even second year was a lot. You're taking a lot more credits, and you're trying to balance sleep and exercise and nutrition and, oh yeah, have a life, right? And make friends and build lifelong relationships. And so another thing that I want to bring up during this journey was first year going to what was called the I House. It was our optometric fraternity at the Ohio State University College of Optometry. And yeah, I'll never forget, there was other, second, third, and some fourth years there. And the social aspect was wonderful. And it really pushed us to collaborate and just relaxing and get out of our minds at times and connect on a different level personally. And, they had tailgates, they had different parties throughout the year, but they also had the opportunity for, us to get involved philanthropically. There was the opportunity to live there. I never did, but a cool experience. And I'm not sure if every optometry school has that, but if you have the chance to get involved in an optometric fraternity, or in groups outside of optometry where you're able to collaborate and learn more and build those relationships, highly recommend you do, because those relationships are going to drive you through some of the more challenging years. So made it through first year, jumped into second year, and then second year was all about reinforcing skill development, some of the basics, and then third year was taking those skill levels and driving things home, all while in preparation for national boards, so the MBEO, and making sure that we become optometrists. And so for me, I really leaned on others around me. I felt like I retained information well, but I would run into as I referenced earlier, kind of get in my own head, and definitely suffered from anxiety and a little bit of an obsessive mindset during optometry school, where I would worry about not knowing the information to the level that I need to pass a lab or pass a test or a course, to the point where even too, I ended up talking to Ohio State, had some on-site counselors to help navigate those experiences. I mean, I remember studying so hard for something like, let's just say, an anatomy test, and I would know things in and out. I would feel great. And then just walking up into the building to go and get in front of the classroom and start to get to file in there and get ready for the test, I just felt like a wave of emotion of just fear, almost like, what happens if I don't, like self-doubt, self-criticism. And so that was really influential for me to identify that, sometimes we don't have it all, not everything's buttoned up, and we don't have it all put together. And to learn that those experiences, those fears, some of them are irrational, some of them are real, and how to work through and, push forward in life and navigate life that way. And I think it made me a better individual and a better clinician. So another point that I want to bring up to anybody listening is if you run into anxiety, depression, any kind of mental health ailments during school, especially about testing, national boards, about patient care, talk to someone. Take the time and the energy and the effort to utilize school resources or find an independent professional to help you through those thoughts, feelings, and emotions, because it can be stressful. You're taking out a lot of money to become a expert in patients' eye health and vision care needs, the doctor of optometry degree that you will receive. And it's easy to get in your own head. It's easy to let things build up and compound, and it limits your ability to truly become the best possible optometrist that you can be. And so, school to me, though, I feel like it was such a blur. I remember going through first year, I remember going through second year, even third year, and I was constantly thinking about the next step, the next test, the next clinical, practical, the next preparation of what am I doing during fourth year for rotations? Where am I going to practice? What, do I want to do residency or do I not want to do a residency? How to prepare for all the national board examinations. Um, I feel like it was just a constant drive of what is next in this process. And so, again, coming back to just collaborating and working with those alongside you, it's one thing to map it all out. It's another thing to go through that process with others. And I do believe that the rising tide lifts all ships. And you can find classmates that you study well with and you get along with well, and you can socialize well and just relax and decompress with well. That is a huge factor. And that was a huge factor, at least for me, to be successful in an optometry school. I had a girlfriend that was a classmate of mine for a number of years. She was great, and I was able to learn and lean into just that relationship. I had individuals that were living in the house that I lived in, and roommates, friends that I'd go to the gym with, or friends that I would go to play basketball with. We had an intramural team that was a lot of fun. Those individuals that I had referenced from the iHouse, and just in general, these class sizes are small, and there tend to be anywhere between 60% female, upwards of 80% female. So more females than males, but just overall, you're going to get to know each other. And I highly recommend that you do to the greatest level, because in doing so, you will become the best version of yourself throughout school. But back to leadership, I had an opportunity to run for the AOSA executive president, and I'll never forget this. The late Gil Pierce, rest in peace, an incredible human being, was really involved in the Ohio Optometric Association when I was an optometrist. And uh, whether you're an optometrist listening to this, an optometry student, pre-optometrist, well, we are very much so legislative profession. And Gil's pitch to me was, all right, Ryan, you're finishing up your trustee year. What are you going to do next? And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll run for secretary, vice president. He looks at me and he says, Ryan, why don't you run for president? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know, am I good enough? I didn't win the class president position. Would I be able to convince my peers on the board? Would I be able to be compelling enough? Would I be a good enough leader? But he gave me the confidence to just say yes. All right, I'm going to submit that I'm interested. And I remember going through the process of running for class president, and then now looking at how poorly I got my ass handed to me, pardon my French, to preparing for this, to preparing to run for the executive president of the American Optometric Student Association. And I remember this is before artificial intelligence. Obviously, the internet was there, but putting together a rough draft, an outline of what I wanted to say. And then I put together an actual speech. And for the better part of the speech, I memorized the vast majority of it, and I knew what I was going to say. And the other individual that ran against me gave a great speech, and he was compelling. He did read his speech off, and I think that gave me an upper edge to be a little bit more influential, to get out there and deliver my speech and why I believed that I should be president. And a long story short is I ended up winning that position. And I'll never forget how it just changed things for me throughout my third year, going into fourth year, of how I viewed the profession, how I was able to better understand how we operate, how industry supports us, how we can, with a stroke of a pen, gain access, how with the stroke of a pen we can be limited in our abilities. That right there kind of fueled my continued growth in leadership, something that maybe I didn't have throughout life. I always felt I was an extrovert. I was always bringing people together, collaborating with others. But this in particular was one of my favorite parts about being involved in optometry school and at the Ohio State University College of Optometry. It really did open up a lot of doors for me, and I'm forever grateful for that. But as I referenced, the first 3 years went by really quickly, and then it's like you're preparing for fourth year. And fourth year to me is like living out of a suitcase, extern rotations every 3 to 4 months. My first rotation was at the Salisbury VA Medical Center in North Carolina, knowing that I wanted to live, reside, and practice here. That was a big one on my list, and I'm very grateful of that experience. And then the second one, I went to the Toledo Eye Center, 3 months actually living at home. So that was cool just to be back locally in Metro Detroit, driving to and from Toledo. And I'm working with Dave Bijat, who's a fantastic clinician and just a great guy, and really enjoyed that experience at the ODMD site. And my final rotations were around Ohio State within the school clinics, but also some of the external clinics. And to anybody who's listening who is either gone through fourth year, maybe they are in the process of, or they're preparing for it, these are some formative years. And I think it's really important to take all the information that you learn, to do everything in your ability to provide patient care, obviously as an extern to the highest level, and then ask questions when things don't line up, when things don't make sense. Lean into your preceptors. Really dive into, if this happens, then what? If that happens, then what? Just building out differentials and understanding what clinical skills you need to have and what tests you need to run, and just allowing you to think like a provider. So incredibly important, because when you get out, you don't have that person right there next to you to go and just ask questions. Yeah, of course you can message your friends, and you may work in a practice that has, multi-doctors that you can lean into, but you need to build up your own clinical competency. And that fourth year is just so very important to do so. And so, my experience at Ohio State, it's funny coming from Michigan State and then transitioning into another Big Ten university. I was hesitant to root for the Buckeyes. I call myself a Sparty Buck. I still root for the Spartans at all cost, but I'll root for the Buckeyes when they're not playing the Spartans, which is 99% of the time. And I'm really grateful for the leadership there, for everybody that was a part of administration, all the teachers, all my classmates. And I just really think that as you go through professional school, particularly optometry school, do so with an open mind. Know that you're going to grow and develop and evolve a lot. And if anybody's listening who maybe they've been out for a couple of years, they've been out for several years, please share your experience and some of the highs and lows that you've had during optometry school in the comments. I do think that that's important for others to learn and just kind of acknowledge and grow from. But for me, it was all about coming in, adapting, evolving, being resilient, and essentially graduating as a better individual, a more educated person to help and serve the eye health and vision care needs of the public, but also a better man, right? And better for my community, better for the wife that I met, my wife when I met her in North Carolina, and my kids that I have now. And so I'm grateful for that journey and happy to be a resource for anybody who's listening and wondering, what is optometry school like? Or, hey, I'm running into these kind of challenges in optometry school. Or, hey, I just finished optometry school. What is next? Because for me, what was next, and it'll be another podcast down the road, is I made the decision to do an optometric residency. And there's pros and cons in the current landscape of being in optometry school, of doing so. I still am very much so satisfied with my decision to do so. But that's really where we open up Pandora's box, and you can go a number of different directions with your professional career. So all that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to my optometry school journey. Stay tuned for my next podcast where we can reflect and grow stronger together.